You never expect a calm afternoon to turn into a thunderstorm. But there I was, sitting by the kitchen window when my cousin's voice sliced through the silence like a rusty saw. "I need you to write a letter for me," she said, all sweet and innocent. The shock hit me harder than the years before, years I'd swallowed the bitter pill of her betrayal without a word. My savings vanished, and I blamed someone else quietly taking my punishment. Now, after 2 decades, she wants my help. What could I say? Now, before you judge me for swallowing that bitter pill so quietly, let me paint you a picture of my life back then, because, believe me, it wasn't some soap opera drama played out on a fancy stage. By the way, before we dive in, tell me in the comments, ever seen someone get the revenge they really deserved? I read all of them. Hey, while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's continue. I was Anna Bell, 27 years old, working as a teller at the First National Bank of Millersville, a small town that believed gossip traveled faster than the morning train. The kind of place where everybody knew your business, or at least pretended they didn't. My cousin, Lydia, was the sort of person who could charm the birds out of the trees, but behind that smile was a crooked shadow I learned to recognize, even if I never spoke it aloud. She had a way of drifting into the room right when you least expected it, humming that tune she liked, the one I hated. Not loud, just enough to set my nerves on edge. Once, while I was counting bills at the bank, she slipped in like a cat and, with a glance sharp as a butcher's knife, asked me how much cash I'd had that morning. I told her the usual, thinking nothing of it. But that look, that small, quick smile as if she already knew something I didn't, made the hair on my arms stand straight. At family dinners, she had this habit of forgetting her wallet, always eyeing my purse or the silverware, and when I laughed about it later with my sister Mary Lou, she said, "Lydia's got a way about her. Like she's always testing the water." I smiled, but inside something tightened, a little knot of worry. Lydia was always borrowing little things and never quite giving them back. "A scarf here, a book there, oh, I lost it somewhere," she'd say, tilting her head and batting her lashes like an innocent child. But my savings, that was no small thing. It wasn't a trinket or a dress she could slip away with unnoticed. Still, I didn't raise my voice. I played my part quietly, polite, forgiving, maybe even foolish. After all, Lydia was family, and family quarrels were best left behind closed doors. But when she started showing up at my workplace more often, asking strange questions about my hours and who had access to the bank's tills, I started making small adjustments. I counted the cash twice before leaving the vault, tucked my purse away in the tightest corner of my locker, and avoided lending an ear to Lydia's chatter. One rainy Thursday, just days before everything fell apart, I caught her sneaking around the back entrance of the bank after closing hours. I was locking up when I saw her crouched behind the bushes, fiddling with something that gleamed in the dim light. I didn't confront her. I just stood there, holding my breath until she slipped away like a shadow and vanished down Main Street. Back home that night, I sat with Mary Lou over cups of bitter coffee and told her everything, though not a word of accusation passed my lips. She looked me over, concerned. "Anna, you sure you're all right? Seems like Lydia's up to something." "I don't know," I said, stirring the coffee absently, "but I'm going to keep an eye out." The days that followed, I became a bit of a ghost in my own life. I was careful where I stepped, who I talked to, and what I let slip. At home, I watched Lydia's visits grow more frequent but carefully kept my distance. One evening, as the sun was dipping low, Lydia dropped by unexpectedly, waving a little envelope like a prize. "Got something for you," she said, her eyes gleaming. "You'll want to see this." I took it, feeling the weight of the paper inside. A letter from a bank official, asking for clarification on some missing funds. My heart skipped, but I said nothing, not even a flicker of suspicion crossing my face. "Funny, isn't it?" she smiled, "how these things happen." I nodded, pressing my lips together, hiding the storm brewing beneath calm waters. That night I sat by the window, the envelope unopened on the table. The world outside moved on, oblivious to the quiet battle forming in the house where I once felt safe. In the coming weeks, Lydia's whispers about money and missing items grew louder in the corners of the family gatherings. But whenever anyone asked me, I stayed silent. Not because I didn't know, but because the cost of speaking out seemed too high. My savings weren't just money. They were dreams, small but precious, and the betrayal was a wound that could never be seen but forever felt. I learned that silence can sometimes speak louder than a shout, especially when the heart is heavy and the world too small to escape the echo. And so, I waited for the moment when the silence would finally break. It was a chilly Monday morning when the whole thing finally blew up like a firecracker in a dry cornfield. The sun was barely up, painting the sky a sleepy pink, but I was already at the bank, as usual, stacking bills behind the teller's window. The place smelled like old paper and polished wood, the comforting scent of a place where money meant trust, or at least it was supposed to. "Anna, you need to come to the manager's office," said Mr. Collins, the bank's gruff but fair manager. His face was pale, his voice tight like he was chewing on a mouthful of gravel. I straightened my skirt, heart fluttering a little, not from guilt, but from the strange sense that something was off. I followed him, the quiet click of my heels on the linoleum ringing in the empty hallway. In the office, I found Mrs. Davenport, the regional inspector, sitting stiff as a wax doll, with a file spread open before her. She didn't smile, didn't offer any pleasantries, just looked me over like a judge sizing up a defendant. "Anna, there's been a discrepancy found in the cash handling for your shifts," she said flatly. "Some of the bank's funds have gone missing." I blinked, my mind racing. "Missing? Are you sure? There must be some mistake." Her eyes didn't soften. "The records are clear. We have security footage showing unauthorized access to the vault during your shifts, and a significant sum was withdrawn." I swallowed hard, forcing calm. "I've always been careful. Someone else must have had access." Mr. Collins nodded slowly. "But as the teller responsible, you're the one we have to question." The room seemed to shrink. I could almost hear the whispers gathering outside the office walls, like vultures circling for a feast. "Who else could it be?" Mrs. Davenport pressed. "Security shows only you and a few trusted employees have keys." I wanted to scream, to say Lydia's name loud enough to shatter the glass, but the words stuck in my throat. Before I could answer, the door creaked open and Lydia slipped inside, wearing that same sweet, innocent smile. "Oh, Anna," she said, voice like honey, "what a terrible mess. I just came to help clear things up." My stomach churned. She was as calm as if she'd walked into a Sunday picnic, not a room where my whole life was about to unravel. Mrs. Davenport's gaze flicked to Lydia. "Do you have something to add?" Lydia nodded. "Yes, I have proof that Anna here isn't to blame. See this?" She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and handed it over. It looked official, stamped and signed. "This letter says that Anna was not at fault. The bank's records were tampered with. Someone else must have tried to pin this on her." I wanted to reach for it, to tear it apart, but I stayed frozen. Lydia's eyes met mine for a fleeting second, sharp, calculating. Mr. Collins looked puzzled. "Where did you get this?" Lydia shrugged, her smile never wavering. "A friend in the auditing department. I just happened to come across it." Mrs. Davenport studied the paper carefully. "We'll need to verify this document's authenticity," she said, but her tone suggested she already believed it. I could feel the room tilting, the ground slipping from beneath me. "Anna," Mr. Collins said gently, "until this is sorted out, you're suspended." The word hit me like a hammer. Suspended, punished without a trial. I bit my lip, swallowing the lump in my throat, nodding as if the world wasn't crashing around me. After the meeting, I walked through the bank's main hall like a ghost. People stared, whispers trailing behind me like shadows. Some looked pitying, others suspicious. Mary Lou caught my arm outside by the lockers. "Anna, I'm so sorry." "This isn't right," she said, voice low and fierce. "We'll get through this." I smiled weakly. "Thanks, Mary, but for now I just need to keep quiet." That evening I sat alone in my small apartment, the silence thicker than ever. The letter Lydia brought weighed on the table between us like a guillotine's blade. I knew the paper was false, a carefully crafted lie. But how to fight a ghost that could vanish before you touched it? The tension wrapped around me like a heavy cloak, suffocating but also awakening something deep inside. I wasn't going to cry out, no sir. I wasn't going to beg for justice in a town that already picked sides. Instead, I folded my hands and waited, plotting my next move with the patience of a cat stalking its prey. The storm had come, and I was ready to meet it head-on. Yet the question burned in my mind: what would I do next? Could I find proof that Lydia's sweet smile hid a serpent's bite? Or would I forever bear the weight of a crime I didn't commit? Only time would tell. The days following my suspension stretched out like an endless ribbon, heavy with uncertainty, but also thick with the smell of determination. If Lydia thought she could pin this on me and walk away smiling, she had another thing coming. I may have stayed quiet before, but the quiet was only the calm before the storm I was about to unleash. I started by visiting old friends at the bank, people who had worked there long enough to know the nooks and crannies, the creaky locks, and the little secrets hidden behind the polished facade. Tom, the night janitor, was my first stop. He had a steady gaze and a laugh like a worn-out engine, the kind that didn't break easily. I found him humming as he scrubbed the marble floor late one evening, the smell of lemon cleaner thick in the air. "Tom," I said softly, "can I talk to you?" He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Anna, what brings you here? Shouldn't you be resting up?" "I need to ask about the bank after hours, who comes in, what's locked and what's not." He scratched his chin, eyes narrowing. "Well, the vault's got a fancy new lock since last year, but the side door's a different story. If you know the right trick, it's not as secure as the bank makes it seem." That trick, his words stuck like glue. I nodded slowly, careful not to show the fire lighting inside me. "I think someone's been using that door," I whispered. Tom leaned in, lowering his voice. "There's been strange shadows around after hours. I don't get involved much, but you might want to check the security tapes from the back entrance." The very next day, I found myself hovering near the security room. I hadn't worked the graveyard shift in years, but there was a friendly face there, Clara, the security officer, who knew me from when I was fresh-faced and eager. "Clara," I said, "I'm trying to clear my name. Could you help me with something?" She hesitated, then smiled with genuine warmth. "If it helps you, sure, what do you need?" I spent the afternoon watching the grainy footage, rewinding and pausing, focusing on those moments after closing time. It was slow work, eyes straining to catch a shadow, a flicker of movement. And then there it was, Lydia slinking around the back entrance, key in hand, moving like a fox in the henhouse. My heart leapt. This was the proof I needed, not words or rumors, but a clear picture of the one who had spun the web. Later that week, I took another step. I met Mary Lou for coffee at our favorite little cafe down the street. The place smelled of strong brew and fresh pastries, a comforting place where secrets could be whispered without fear. I slid a photo across the table. "This is Lydia," I said quietly. Mary Lou frowned. "Is that from the bank?" I nodded. "I got help from Clara. Lydia's been sneaking in after hours." Mary Lou's jaw tightened. "So you've got something solid now." "But it's not enough," I said. "There's more. I need to show the tampering of records, the forged letter Lydia brought to the meeting." Mary Lou bit her lip. "That's going to be tougher, but maybe you could find someone in the auditing department who isn't on her side." I thought about it. The bank had a few clerks who kept to themselves, eyes always watching. One of them, George, had always seemed more interested in numbers than gossip. I remembered seeing him once glance sideways at Lydia with suspicion in his eyes. That Friday, I approached George quietly in the filing room, where stacks of ledgers lay in dusty piles. "George," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you remember anything unusual about the records recently? Any mistakes or strange entries?" He looked up, blinking like waking from a daydream. "Funny you ask. There was an error in the ledger last month, right after the last audit. I caught it, but the boss told me to overlook it, said it was probably a computer glitch." "Could you show me?" I asked, heart pounding. We sat together and he pulled up the files, pointing out the inconsistencies. The numbers didn't add up, withdrawals that weren't logged properly, transfers that disappeared into thin air. And beneath it all, a trail of fingerprints that, if followed carefully, led straight to Lydia's desk. I left the bank that day clutching a stack of photocopies and feeling a spark of hope. For the first time since the suspension, I felt the weight on my chest lift just a little. But the hardest part was yet to come. Lydia was clever, and she had a way of turning every situation to her advantage. I had to be smarter, faster. At home, I laid out everything I had on the kitchen table, photos, ledgers, notes from Tom and George. The evidence formed a map, a path leading out of the darkness she'd trapped me in. Mary Lou came by that evening, peering over the papers. "You're ready for this, Anna. You've got more than enough to confront her." I smiled faintly. "I'm not just confronting her, I'm taking back what's mine." The night settled in, and the house was still except for the soft ticking of the clock. I sat back, hands folded, feeling a quiet strength growing within me. No longer the silent victim, I was becoming a force to be reckoned with. And when the time came, Lydia wouldn't see it coming. Not a soul would. The day of reckoning arrived like a thunderclap on a hot summer afternoon. I stood in the small conference room of the bank, the walls plastered with faded wallpaper that had seen better days, much like the family I was about to face. The long, polished table stretched between me and Lydia, who sat with her usual coy smile, the kind that made you want to reach through and shake some honesty into her. Around us were a handful of stern faces. Mr. Collins, Mrs. Davenport, George, Tom, and Clara, my unlikely army of witnesses and silent supporters. Lydia's eyes flicked to the door the moment I walked in, as if weighing whether to make a run for it. I kept my gaze steady and cold, like the steel blade of a knife she couldn't see coming. There was no room for the soft forgiveness I'd once clung to. Today was about strength and justice. Mr. Collins cleared his throat, breaking the thick silence. "We've reviewed all the evidence Miss Bell has presented," he said, nodding toward me, "and it's more than compelling." Lydia's smile twitched, but she said nothing. She folded her hands delicately in her lap, but the twitching of her fingers betrayed the calm facade. Mrs. Davenport leaned forward, her eyes sharp as eagle's talons. "Miss Lydia, can you explain how you came into possession of this forged letter?" She held up the very document that had nearly ruined me, the one Lydia had paraded like a prize. Lydia's throat bobbed nervously. I received it from a friend in auditing. I had no idea it was forged. I was trying to help." George leaned in, his voice steady but firm. "That friend was you, Lydia, the same day you altered the records. I saw you accessing the ledger after hours, long after your shift ended." Tom nodded, crossing his arms. "I saw her sneaking in through the back door, too. It's not just whispers or rumors anymore." Clara pulled out the security footage on the small monitor, the grainy image flickering to life. Lydia's figure moved stealthily under the dim light, keys jangling softly as she slipped inside the bank's side entrance after hours. I swallowed the lump in my throat but stood taller. "I never asked for this," I said quietly. "But when your lies cost me everything, my job, my reputation, my peace, I had no choice but to fight." Lydia's eyes flashed with anger, then quickly masked it with a venomous smile. "You think you've won. This isn't over, Anna." I shook my head. "It's over for you." Her voice dropped cold and low. "You'll regret this." But I was done with fearing threats. "I already have lost enough, now it's your turn." Mr. Collins nodded gravely. "Given the evidence, the board has decided to reinstate Miss Bell immediately, with full back pay. As for Miss Lydia, there will be an internal investigation for the breach of security and fraud." Lydia's face went pale, the mask slipping for just a second before she slammed her purse shut and stormed out of the room. The door slammed behind her like the final curtain on a long, painful act. As silence settled, George let out a breath. "I'm glad you fought back, Anna. Not many would." Mary Lou, who had slipped in unnoticed, squeezed my hand. "You did what was right. I'm proud of you." The flood of relief hit me in waves, but there was no time to rest. The battle had been won, yes, but the war for my dignity, my peace, was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Lydia's reputation crumbled. The bank's investigation revealed more of her tricks: misplaced funds, forged signatures, and unauthorized withdrawals that stretched further than I had imagined. Meanwhile, I was welcomed back with cautious smiles and respectful nods. My name cleared, my position restored, but the real victory was something the money or the job couldn't buy: a new sense of self-worth and resilience. One evening, as I closed up at the bank, Mr. Collins caught me by the door. "Anna, the board wants to offer you a supervisory role," he said, voice warm. "Your diligence and courage have set a standard." I smiled, a genuine one this time. "Thank you, sir, I'm ready for the challenge." Walking home that night, the streetlights casting long shadows, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of betrayal lifted, replaced by a quiet strength that no one could take away. I knew Lydia's threats were empty. She had lost more than money. She lost her place in the family, in the bank, and in the truth. And as for me, I was no longer the silent girl who swallowed injustice. I was a woman who faced the storm and came out standing, fierce and unbroken. With my name finally cleared and a new title pinned to my chest, I could feel the tide beginning to turn, not just in the bank's quiet halls, but in the way I held myself. The weight of Lydia's betrayal wasn't gone, but it had been reshaped into a strange kind of armor, something that made me move differently through the world. One Monday morning, as I arrived at the bank, the familiar scent of polished wood and ink greeted me like an old friend. Clara was at her post, flashing me a smile as I stepped through the door. "Back in action, huh?" she teased, handing me a steaming cup of coffee. I took the cup gratefully, and with a little extra authority now. She laughed. "Don't let it go to your head, supervisor." That day, I found myself in meetings where my ideas carried more weight. When I suggested tightening security around after-hours access, Mr. Collins nodded approvingly. "I think it's time we installed a new system, Anna," he said, his eyes reflecting a confidence in me that felt like a balm. But it wasn't just at work that things shifted. The neighbors who used to glance away when Lydia passed now stopped by to say hello to me. Even old Mrs. Jenkins, who kept a suspicious eye on the neighborhood gossip, offered a warm nod as I carried groceries up the steps. At home, Mary Lou and I celebrated with a small dinner, nothing fancy, just two women who had weathered a storm. "You've changed, Anna," she said between bites of pie. "Stronger, more sure." I smiled. "I don't feel like the same person who sat quietly while Lydia tore everything down. I've learned something about standing up." Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Tom, the janitor from the bank, holding a small envelope. "Thought you might want this," he said, passing it over. Inside was a letter from the bank's board, praising my dedication and offering a modest bonus for my role in uncovering the truth. I looked up, gratitude softening my voice. "Thank you, Tom, this means more than you know." As weeks turned into months, the small victories piled up. I organized workshops on financial security for the staff, earning respect beyond my position. People came to me for advice, not just on banking but on standing firm when life tried to knock you down. One afternoon, Lydia's name came up in hushed tones at the bank. A few whispered that she had left town quietly, no farewell, no explanation. I felt no joy in that, only a quiet satisfaction that justice had taken its course. At home, I began saving for a modest place of my own, a space where the past couldn't follow. I pored over catalogs of cozy furniture and daydreamed about walls painted my favorite shade of green, something fresh, something new. Mary Lou stopped by one evening, eyes sparkling. "You're building a new life, Anna, I can see it." I nodded, looking around the small apartment that had held both sorrow and strength. "It's time I did." On a particularly bright morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, I sat by the kitchen table sipping tea, feeling a calm I hadn't known in years. The battles were far from over, but I had taken the first steps toward a future that wasn't defined by fear or betrayal. At work, Mr. Collins approached with a grin. "Ready to lead the new security initiative?" I met his eyes with steady confidence. "Absolutely, it's time this bank and this town learns the meaning of true trust." And so, with small but steady strides, I built my life back. Each day was a brick in the foundation of resilience, a testament to what happens when you refuse to be broken. Lydia's shadow might have stretched long, but my light burned brighter. And in that light, I found not just victory, but the promise of new beginnings. The winds of change began to sweep through Millersville like a summer storm, shaking loose old branches and clearing the air. Lydia's fall was swift and relentless. Rumors spread faster than wildfire, not the kind that made me shiver, but the kind that warmed the cockles of my heart with quiet justice. She found herself the subject of whispers in grocery aisles and church pews. Her name no longer spoken with the usual cordial smiles, but with cautious distance and veiled contempt. One afternoon, as I was locking up the bank, Mr. Collins caught my arm with a firm but friendly grip. "Anna," he said, "the board's decided to pursue legal action against Lydia. The evidence is solid, and we can't let this slide." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and resolve. It's time she pays the price for what she did. Meanwhile, at work, the new security measures I'd championed began to take hold. New locks, tighter protocols, and a watchful eye kept the bank safer than it had been in years. Staff morale lifted, they whispered about a brighter future where trust wasn't a fragile thing, but the real transformation was in me. Where once I'd been tentative, hesitant, now I walked with a purpose that couldn't be ignored. My promotion to supervisor brought new challenges and new respect. I found myself mentoring younger tellers, sharing not just skills but lessons of resilience and courage. Mary Lou stopped by one evening, carrying a basket of fresh-baked bread and a knowing smile. "You're not just surviving, Anna, you're thriving." I smiled, grateful for her unwavering friendship. "It's been a long road, but I'm finally standing on solid ground." The court proceedings against Lydia began quietly, but the town turned out in full force. I sat in the back of the courtroom, clutching my coat tightly as lawyers presented evidence piece by piece, forged signatures, stolen funds, false accusations. Lydia sat across the room, pale and defeated, her usual confidence stripped away like bark from a tree. After days of testimony, the verdict was clear. Lydia was found guilty of fraud and theft. The judge sentenced her to restitution payments and community service, a decision that echoed through the town's gossip for weeks. Back at the bank, I received a letter from the regional office, a formal commendation for my role in uncovering the fraud and restoring the bank's integrity. It was more than an acknowledgement. It was a sign that my hard work and quiet strength had not gone unnoticed. At home, I began making plans for a new chapter. I browsed through listings for a small house on the outskirts of town, envisioning a garden where I could plant roses and a porch where I could sit and watch the world go by. I shared these dreams with Mary Lou one afternoon over cups of tea. "It's about time you had a place that's all yours," she said warmly. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden hues through the window, I found myself reflecting on how far I'd come. The betrayal that once felt like a prison now seemed like a distant memory, a shadow that had only made my light burn brighter. My relationship with Lydia's family, once strained to the breaking point, began to shift. Some reached out with cautious apologies, others kept their distance. I understood the wounds ran deep on all sides, but I was no longer chained to the past. At work, a young teller named Emily approached me nervously one day. "Miss Bell, I just wanted to say thank you. Your story, it's given me courage." I smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Keep standing tall, Emily. That's the key." The seasons turned, bringing new faces and fresh challenges, but I faced them all with a steady heart. I learned that strength wasn't just about winning battles, it was about carrying yourself with dignity after the fight. And so, as Lydia's troubles mounted and my own life blossomed, the scales of justice balanced at last. I wasn't just the woman who lost her savings 20 years ago, I was the one who rebuilt everything from the ashes. And in the quiet moments between the rush of everyday life, I finally felt free. Years later, Lydia's name barely stirred a whisper in Millersville, but mine, well, I'd become something of a fixture, a woman who'd weathered storms and built her own horizon. One crisp morning, Mary Lou and I sat on my porch, the scent of blooming roses weaving between our words. "Anna," she said, smiling wide, "you've come a long way from that quiet girl." I chuckled, sipping my coffee. Maybe so. But quiet taught me plenty, like how to listen, watch, and wait. Just then, the mailman handed me an envelope. Inside was a request. Lydia, after all these years, wanted a recommendation letter for immigration. I folded it slowly, eyes meeting Mary Lou's. "I haven't forgotten," I said softly, "and I never will." She nodded, understanding without needing more. I stood, the morning sun warming my face, ready for whatever came next. Life had taught me resilience wasn't just surviving, it was choosing who to become. And I chose to be free.